Beal has walked back his claim that the US consumes less meat than the global average. And when I saw this morning, I had a devil and an angel on each shoulder as to how I ought to react. Okay, we have got a good one today. Beal has walked back his claim that the US consumes less meat than the global average. He's deleted the post, he's issued a correction post, he's even unblocked me on LinkedIn. So it's a good day here. Firstly, and most importantly, a lot of credit to Beal for doing this. This is a really difficult thing to do. He's issued a correction within 48 hours, explicitly walked back what he said before and deleted his previous post. He even tagged the guy who showed him the mistake to say thank you. I haven't had time to discover the extent of my other disagreements with this guy, but I have to say on this occasion, this was well handled by Beal. This was pretty much as well as you can handle this kind of situation. Beal posted, "For anyone following the meaty debate, here's what I have arrived at for my best guess, given we can't know for sure because we have scarce actual dietary intake data globally. We likely consume nearly twice as much meat in the US as the global average, and a similar amount to Central, Eastern Europe and South America. So the truth is somewhere in between what is estimated by FAO food balance sheets and the Global Dietary Database. Read more detailed analysis here." And he's linked this table. This has his triangulated estimates, which are kind of somewhere between the two, as well as a corrected estimate based on the adjusted data. I'll get into more of the detail of what actually was the problem here in a moment, because the not including chicken was really only one part of this. So you can see comparing the US and the global average on his corrected numbers, he still has the US coming out quite a bit ahead of the global average. On the FAO numbers, that has it nearly 3x the global average. And on Beal's new triangulated estimate, it does have the US roughly 2x the global average. And when I saw this morning, I had a devil and an angel on each shoulder as to how I ought to react. And, well, I'm grateful to my wife for making me a better person. Let's say that. I posted, "Okay, credit where it's due, this is a class act from Beal. The well-known food system scientist posted the surprising claim this week that the US consumes less meat than the global average. When I posted criticism and he blocked me, I thought, here we go. I'm sincerely delighted, and I must say a little surprised, to see that less than 48 hours later, Beal has deleted that post, made a post with corrected data, and even tagged Oliver Tahazadeh to thank him for pointing out the major error. In my war on bad pro-meat science, I am 1000% willing to applaud the people who are willing to put up their hands and say, hey, I got this one wrong. Seriously, the level of humility and intellectual integrity that Beal has demonstrated in this case is praiseworthy. If scientists, who are, after all, only human, were always this willing to take on criticism and this swift to correct the record in public, the world would be a better place. I'm sure that Beal and I will continue to find plenty to disagree on, but I'm pleased to report that we're connected again, and I have to say serious kudos to him for this correction post." So, you can blame my wife for the de-escalation and the lack of further content from this. Seriously though, this is really an impressive response, right? AHDB didn't do this, the Dublin Declaration didn't do this. If I posted something incorrect, and some meat industry scientist turned up and pointed it out, and it turned out that they were correct, would I have the humility to correct myself in public within 48 hours? I can only hope so. Let's look a little bit more at the backstory here, because it actually wasn't the thing that I posted about chicken which was mainly the problem here, although Beal did also update that in his updated estimates. So Tybal posted, thank you Oliver Tahazadeh for pointing out that the global dietary database standardized intakes across countries, i.e. assumed all individuals aged 11 to 74 years consumed 2,000 calories. This, in combination with the vast overestimates of FAO food balance sheets in high-income countries due to unaccounted food waste, 1/3 on average, is why the estimates are so different. Even though the US is not the top meat consuming country, I can see now that we very likely consume more than the global average. So this is quite a technical point about how the data that underlie Tybiel's paper are adjusted. This isn't the criticism that I made in my last video, but I did actually join this Oliver chap in making the point in the thread. Again, this wasn't included in the video that I published yesterday. Let's take a look. Oh no, this can't be true. Someone's just commented, the data used here is normalized to 2,000 calories. Meaning that they are comparing, assuming that everyone's having the same number of calories in these different regions. Why would you do that? I really hope that's not true. This is incredibly misleading if so. USDA estimates that intake for US consumers of 3,864 calories, far greater than Europe, Latin America, and East Asia. The actual intake is far different for all regions. Data from the OECD and NHANES US food intake surveys capturing actual food intake implies the US does eat more meat than the global average. Wow, okay, I've got to comment and just confirm this. I said, tell me this data isn't normalized to 2,000 calories when US consumers eat almost double that. Surely you wouldn't post that. Let's have a look in the paper. Modelled estimates of per person daily intake of animal source foods, excluding them processed food. Data from Miller. Okay, let's have a look at this. Here it is. To allow for comparability between population subgroups, we standardize dietary intakes to 2,000 calories per day before computing the dietary patterns. But the unadjusted dietary intakes may be lower among populations with lower energy requirements, for example, infants and young children and seniors, or higher among populations consuming more than 2,000 calories per day. Oh, that's cooked. So I chased this point down for a little while, but honestly it was late and I felt like I had enough with the point about not including chicken. I decided that I didn't really need to pursue this other point about the adjusted data. I attacked the claim on the basis of not including chicken, which I think is also valid, but ultimately it was this other guy, Oliver Tahazadeh, that got Tybiel to walk back the claim. And I'm very happy to give Oliver full credit for getting Tybiel to walk back this claim. I don't have the time, or in some cases the expertise, to expose exactly what is wonky about every piece of pro-meat science, but other people in the scientific community do. And part of my purpose of being out here and being a little bit brash and a little bit boisterous is to start to shift the norms on the scientific community pushing back on pro-meat junk science. You don't have to do it in the way that I'm doing it, as long as you are doing your bit to speak up against pro-meat misinformation. So huge props to Oliver Tahazadeh, the professor at Leiden University, on this particular victory, and huge props to William McFarlane Smith, who's a PhD student at Cambridge, who is still fighting the AHDB's misleading report in the comment section trenches over there. Empowering other scientists to speak up is not just a catchphrase, okay? That moment when you see something that looks misleading on social media, maybe you even have an inkling that you know what they're up to, but you think, look, it's only social media, it's not necessarily your job to call it out, maybe you're not entirely sure that your criticism is correct. That's always part of it, right? You're kind of taking a risk. You post a comment saying, I think this is wrong, when some scientist has posted something, and you think, yeah, this is pretty confrontational right now. Let's hope I don't look like an idiot in about 30 seconds. Right? But be empowered. Speak up. Okay, what's the worst that can happen? If Beal had come back and said, well, no, you idiot, of course it includes chicken, what are you talking about? Sure, that would have been a bit embarrassing, but ultimately what's lost, right? The point of scientific discourse is to go back and forth like this, and hopefully synthesis happens and you get closer to the reality. So this is it happening in real time. You're seeing it almost directly, right? We're saying, okay, we've adjusted this GDD measure. Here we've got the FAO measure, and we think that the reality is somewhere in between the two. And I can accept that the FAO one doesn't account for food waste and therefore is going to overestimate on a calorie basis. That might well be the case. Now, I want to say as well, I appreciate that it's a little unconventional for a scientist to be communicating on YouTube in this style, and particularly in such a sort of combative mode. I appreciate that's not going to be to everybody's taste. But the thing is, in a lot of these situations, and I don't think this is the case here, right, given how quickly Beal course corrected in public, which, again, I don't want to undersell how rare or difficult to do that is. In other cases, however, take the Dublin Declaration, for example, I think that it's just bad faith, and bad faith changes everything. But if you're trying to engage with somebody who wants to obfuscate reality, they're not willing to accept reality, and they're going to distort data and warp language and block criticism. What can you do? Again, I spent over a year writing a peer-reviewed scientific response to the Dublin Declaration, and it's published in Nature Food. The authors have completely ignored it, and they just continue to use the Dublin Declaration to spread the misleading idea that we don't need to do anything about eating less meat. If nothing else, communicating via video like this turns up the feeling that this is a personal interaction, compared to just being in the comment section, or even compared to publishing a peer-reviewed critique. This feels way more like, oh, there's an actual human being who's talking to me here, and who is going to be stubborn and hold me accountable for what I'm saying. I think it's so important to set and reinforce the norm of scientists calling out bad science and criticizing bad science. But it is just as important to give credit to those people who do actually come out in public and say, okay, I got this one wrong. I don't want to undersell this. It really is impressive what Beal's done here. Do you know how rare it is to post a strong position on something, have somebody show you contrary evidence, and then change your mind and post that you changed your mind? Especially on such a contentious topic, when you have someone like me on the other side of it who's giving strongly worded pushback and, it's fair to say even being a bit of a jerk about it, right? That takes some real character to actually say, nonetheless, when you're right, you're right. But this is a really good example, a good response, and a good example for other scientists. I think it's really important that we stick to a fact-based conversation, that we respect each other when we correct course, and it'd be great to see this kind of attitude from AHDB and from the Dublin Declaration. Let's see more of this.